I think consumers are hungry for information of like supporting the brands and the businesses that support their values. Like I loved the convenience of Amazon. It doesn't align with my values anymore. So it's not for
Yeah.
me, but for my, somebody else, my neighbor, my parents, whatever, the convenience outweighs for them the negative. And I'm not here to say like one's right and one's wrong, but like you have to do it in a way that's approachable for you. I also work from home, work from by myself. So like my outing where I get to go buy the thing that I need is like an interaction with a person. And I didn't realize how much I was stripping myself of that for what? Ease of convenience to just have it dropped off at my doorstep. And so I think there are a lot of people that are kind of like waking up sounds dramatic, but like more receptive to thinking about supply chain, thinking about how it impacts things. And even if money is tight, it's like, okay, the spending money that I do have, where am I going to put it? What is to do the thing that makes me feel good about how I'm supporting my local economy, my community, the other business owners in my area?
Kiss my aesthetic, branding, marketing, entrepreneurship.
Greetings and welcome back to the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. You might hear my voice a little scratchy today, but we're rolling with it because we have Sadie on today. Welcome to the podcast, Sadie.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Right there with you on the scratchy throat. 'Tis the season, late February, nothing like a head cold.
Literally. No, it's getting the best of me, but we're going to power through. But for anyone who doesn't know you yet and know your story, which we're going to learn all about today, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and who you help?
Absolutely. I'm Sadie Renee. I have been in the food and beverage industry for about 15 years now, specifically the specialty coffee industry. I've had all manner of wonderful jobs and positions and gotten to be a part of so many fun organizations throughout my time in this industry. And my passion is really around helping people find ways to connect with other humans through food and beverage. I think that's such a common thing that we all share, regardless of our culture or our differences. And I've always been just really excited about the potential that, specifically a coffee shop, but lots of other hospitality locales offer as a connection point for just being a good community member or having a little bit of support from another human when you're maybe having a tough time.
Absolutely. And there's going to be so many themes, I think, that we're going to touch from this episode that are so relevant to creatives, to entrepreneurs, to marketing, to branding. Like, there's just so much to touch. But as a foodie myself, who's like always loved a coffee shop experience, did you picture yourself working in coffee? Was like that your goal growing up? Or how did you? What's the end point? Because I feel like we're about the same age. So I feel like if you had told someone, like, I'm going to be a coffee professional, people maybe 15
Right.
like, you're going to be a what? Like, I think of
People
my
are like,
they're like,
LOL, that's
"Is that
a
a job?"
what?
So take us back to the beginning.
Exactly. I love that question. I think I did. I think some of my earliest memories as a kid are of my mom drinking coffee. I'm the oldest of a very large family, and I think she sort of managed all of that chaos by just staying very caffeinated all the time. So I think I had my first sip of coffee maybe at like 5 years old. And I remember probably like, I don't know, between the ages of 5 and 10, like going into a coffee shop and feeling really struck by just the vibe. I think like the fact that there were people there that were either just gathering to connect with each other, that really the true third space experience, I think like
Mhm.
landed pretty early on for me. Like in high school, I remember kind of wanting a barista job and like, searching around for that. And my first job actually was in a Caribou coffee shop in a Hy-Vee grocery store in Kansas City where I grew up. A little bit different than some of the specialty shops that I worked in later, but it was very exciting for me to get to be a part of that experience because that sort of
Mhm.
like barista customer interaction is so powerful. I think the magic of hospitality when you can get to know somebody over time if they're coming in as a regular in a coffee shop. Even if you're just I've waited a lot of tables as well. Like even if you're just like serving someone like a food or a drink, I think there's a lot of power in that. And that's always something that was really important to me, I think.
So you're starting at Caribou Coffee. What's the next jump from that?
From there, I worked my way through a bunch of different shops in Kansas City. I this would have been like, man, I don't know, like early 20 teens probably.
Sure.
Kansas City was at the time at the height of its kind of like specialty scene. Oddly
Sure.
Correct had just launched as, kind of really setting the bar for specialty and putting a lot of focus on the coffee beans themselves and how they were prepared and what the origin and like roast profile was. I worked at the roastery for a while. I worked for Key Coffee back in the day when that existed. And then I started, I think, kind of wanting a little bit more just kind of like getting my hands a little bit dirty on the side of things that pushed that connection mechanism forward. So I was like very interested in marketing. I was very interested in,
Mhm.
why would somebody come to this coffee shop versus another one? What are they getting there that's maybe different than at a Starbucks? Like what besides just like, a different menu or a different supply chain makes these local shops actually more appealing to, somebody who just like wants a cup of coffee. And so for some of the shops that I was working at, I started just sort of like helping them with their social media on the side or helping them with figuring out how to increase traffic during down seasons. And I loved that. It was like so life giving. It was so exciting. I got very lucky early on in my career. I think I started out volunteering actually, this small beverage marketing firm called The Lab in Kansas City, run by a guy named Jason Burton. He was doing like coffee tours across the country.
Mm,
And it started out really small. And I joined his team, I think, as a volunteer for one of those like caffeine crawl tours. And I ended up kind of joining full time and helped him scale that concept. I think by the time I left, we had like 20 events across the country every year. And I felt so lucky to get to travel for that job. I think it gave me like a much more like a wider perspective on the ways that those like hospitality elements exist everywhere. It's not just
yeah,
geo specific, but also like I got so many amazing connections. I met so many folks throughout the industry, and I think that really cemented my love for the coffee industry and for the hospitality industry. And yeah, that I think was like kind of a turning point. I was like, oh, this is actually such a big world. There's so much happening here. There's so many different potentials for like how you can be involved and how you can actually make an impact, which is I'm very driven. I'm very ambitious. It's always really important to me that the things I'm waking up every day and like putting my energy towards have, to the best that I can tell, like a direction and are kind of like working towards positive impact. And so, yeah, I think that was like really meaningful. From there, I did a bunch of things. I did wholesale, or I did like sales of cafe equipment through like a redistribution company for a while.
mhm,
And then I got recruited to the Oatly team by my current business partner, actually. He was employee number one in the US at Oatly, and I joined the team, I don't know, a handful of folks later. And that was a beautiful, wild ride. We did so much, I think, like really incredible work in partnership with the coffee community. And
sure,
we were able to really like provide a lot of resources to that in a way that was like really good for the brand as oat milk sort of like became a thing.
right.
Baristas were such a huge part of that story. And it was like a really, yeah, a really special kind of wild time and like a lot of coming together of all of those other skills that I've been sort of like cultivating up to that point in my career, with that sort of like community development, market
Sure.
development, like marketing, but in a very, like human hospitality oriented.
Sure. Oh, I love all of this because community
Yeah.
is a major theme of almost every podcast episode that we do because it is at least my perspective is like community, the word has been a bit co-opted to mean followers these days. And I keep trying to point out like there's a huge
Mhm.
difference between like amassing a following and actually being a member of a community. What are your thoughts on that and
Yeah.
how because a lot of those businesses are going to look at those KPIs. They are going to look at that. How many followers do we have? How many people came to our event? How many like just volume, 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 volume. And like I feel a lot of larger brands like miss out on the hospitality part that you're talking about. What have been your thoughts on that recently and the
Yeah.
word community and the meaning of it? Because it kind of feels like again, it's kind of been like stolen and almost bastardized to like mean something that it's not.
Yeah. I completely agree. Yes, I think it has, it's gotten set the sort of like co-opting treatment, I think, of like,
Yeah,
oh, like we have a big Instagram following, so we have a community. And like, for some brands, I think that's true. For a lot of them, it
sure,
isn't. I think to me, what always comes to mind is that if it's a real community, then it's not just going to be there for the bright and shiny stuff. It's going to be there when shit really hits the fan as well. And I think that is something that the hospitality industry does really well because like
yeah,
it's very real. There's these businesses are not high margin. There's they kind of are the first to feel the brunt of whatever sort of like social,
sure,
political, like climate things happening. And so you end up with a lot of friction, and I think that is a really core part of the human experience is friction. And I think that if you have a real community, then it has to be a solid enough container that it can hold space for the things that aren't awesome, as well as the magic that comes with being in community.
totally.
I heard a quote. I think I saw this on Instagram the other day, and I don't know who the quote was attributed to, but it made me think of it when you were talking about followers. That something to the tune of Like being a leader isn't about having followers, it's about going first.
Mm,
And I think that the hospitality industry has demonstrated that in a lot of
sure.
ways that are really kind of under the surface. Like so many trends that end up in the mainstream, that end up in, what's on the shelf in grocery stores, that end up in, just sort of like the fabric of our lives in TV narrative, like all these different places. Start with food and bev because it's so core to our experience as humans.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that shared experience, like regardless of whether it's like, your immediate community or just like folks that are maybe also in hospitality and other places, I think is kind of an unspoken bond. And it does carry with it a lot of good, but also a lot of heavy stuff. And I think having that space and being able to continue building out those containers is really helpful. With just feeling like you can depend on folks in your community when you need something or when something kind of really goes off the rails.
And that just harkens to how we even know each other, which is how we connected
Yeah,
through
that's true.
Erica, of just, like, absolutely getting on a call. I had explained to Erica because I think Erica Escalante, she's, again, like, she's this elusive character on the podcast because 'cause I've had her on, like, once, but I think I talk about her all the time because she's connected us to so many great people. But I was
She's
explaining to
amazing.
her how much I was craving a not like a mentorship group and not necessarily any type of group program or like thing that you but just like a chance to vent with people that were in a similar spot professionally and like who've been
Yeah.
in the game now for 10 to 15 years. And that's exactly it. Like I think the three of us, we all got on a call together. I was like sitting in the parking lot with my gym and I'm just sitting there. We're just catching up and saying, like, okay, yeah, well, I'm dealing with this. How's that going for you? And oh, you should talk to so and so. Here's what's going over here. And that's a testament to also the community that you've built, right? Because now you have your new venture with your business partner that you met from your Oatly days. So talk to us about Usual and what that is and what you do now. Like what is your offer now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, we kind of both started Oatly around the same time. And I think when we left Oatly, this is around, I don't know, 2023 probably, we had, a lot of the network that we had come into those jobs with was, stuff we'd been building over our careers up to that point. But leaving Oatly, we had this incredible distribution network servicing all of these independent cafes across the country that we were, on talking to daily. We had thousands of relationships with cafes across the country. It was so magical to feel like that was for me personally, it felt so high value coming out of that role. I mean, like, oh, I've actually been able to make a difference. Like I have something to show for this is like how it really felt. And I think because of how well that worked, like oat milk became such a giant part of everyday life. And we saw firsthand and we're kind of part of watching that, like the coffee community and the hospitality community really make that happen.
Mhm.
I think we both kind of felt a little bit of responsibility and just like desire to take that power and like the impact that has and take it broader and be like, okay, well, if this worked for oat milk, like who would have thought? I remember first days dropping off samples at cafes way back in the day, people were like, oatmeal, goat milk? Like, what do you mean? So it's crazy. It could be anything at all. And we were like, okay, there's like other things that exist in the world that are useful to the hospitality industry. They're useful to the people that like, stop somewhere
Sure.
for a cup of coffee every day. And maybe they don't have the way into this incredible community that Erica's a great example. She and I have known each other for years. I actually like connected with her originally through Oatly. And she's amazing. There's so many things like that it's just, on the consumer packaged goods side of things,
Yeah.
retail and traditional marketing is kind of your go-to. And there's so much magic and power in like the grassroots marketing that can come from doing things a little bit differently and from starting with a little bit of a different channel. And so we launched the Usual Company as a way to kind of connect companies that had something useful to offer the broader food and beverage industry with all of the incredible humans in the coffee industry that are so values forward, that are so relationship driven, and that really care a lot about making the world a better place. And I think, there's a lot of resources available to the CPG side of things. I think, even especially in the past like 10 years or so, there's been a lot more investment potential. It's like it's easier now to start a CPG company than it used to be. And that isn't always true for coffee. And I think one of the goals with starting the Usual Company is to kind of connect the pipes. And sometimes they don't exist and we have to build them from scratch. And that's, a long road. But we're really trying to kind of connect the dots and build some bridges between those two worlds. Is I think, on a macro level, our food system is kind of in a dark spot. And
Oh
there's
yes.
a
Let's
lot
get into
there that
that. I
needs
love talking about food. Yes. Tell me everything.
Yeah, I mean, just like we don't really eat very much real food. We eat a lot of other stuff. We eat, like a lot of processed stuff, a lot of fake stuff. Every few months now, it seems we're like, "Ooh, this was really bad," and we didn't know. We've all been eating it for a long time, and it's, I think that as society and humanity continues to progress, like that to me feels like a really fundamental gap. The stuff that we eat. It's
Sure.
like you are what you eat. That's an
Sure. Sure.
age old saying for a reason. And I think to me, those two things kind of go hand in hand, the sort of like base human need to have food and the base human need to have connection is like nowhere is that more intertwined than at a coffee shop or a restaurant or somewhere else where like community and food are overlapping. And so, yeah, I think just like, you know, that's such a lofty goal to be like, we're making the food system better with our agency. But I think that is really like kind of why Brian and I both got into this. And, I mean, that's all we can do is try. We can try to build the world that we want to live in. And I think,
Totally.
in heavy times such as these, that is even more important. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, what we set out to do. I think from like a very practical perspective, the usual company is a sales and market development agency, and we offer a variety of services. We do consulting, like sales, strategy, market development. We also work with a lot of clients in a like kind of an execution capacity. Like we basically like build them a custom sales and market development team. I always tell people that kind of our biggest thing we say to people when we're talking to anybody is that like you can't decouple sales and marketing. It's always been my personal
Yes. Yep.
bent on things. I think cold calls really only get you so far. Nobody wants to be cold called. Nobody wants to be sold
Mm-mm.
to, especially not
Mhm.
in a relationship driven, values forward industry like the coffee industry. And so our approach is really, built around the values of the coffee industry. It is very relationship forward. We have so many of those relationships that we've nurtured for years. And like, even coming out of our time at Oatly, that we're kind of trying to, help build some connections through that and push the industry forward. And, the company's about 2 years old this month, actually, officially.
Yay.
So we're still very early on, but it's been a very fun 2 years, a lot of learning. And yeah, we're having a good time.
Do you feel that values-based purchasing is a generational, like, interest? Because I think about this with people who are my
Oh,
parents' age and older, and my parents okay, so I started my business in college, and to me, like, peak, like, young entrepreneur was, like, working from a coffee shop. That was, like, my whole personality was, like, getting the latte
yeah.
art and the coffee shop vibe and the being in communion with people that are also it's parallel play, right? It's, like, felt like being in the library studying for finals
Yeah.
because you get that kind of, like, collective dopamine of being around people, and I found that the hardest thing was trying to describe that to my parents who, like, are filter coffee Folgers people. Like, do you know what I mean? And so trying to describe
Yeah.
to them why the $8 coffee was worth it to me to sit there for 4 hours, I find that to be, like, a very millennial thing. Do you feel that there's and now I think
Yeah.
the next evolution of that is millennials even more, like, okay, we're existing in late stage capitalism, there's not really a ton we can do about that, but we do have agency with where we spend our money. Like, I will go out of the way to buy the
Totally.
ice cream from the woman-owned artisanal ice cream shop on my street instead of the chain grocery store, because not only does it taste better, but because I believe in that as a mission. So, yes, it's more expensive, and yes, it's out of my
Yeah.
way, but, like, that to me is, like, a reflection of my values, and especially, like you were saying, in times that feel really challenging, coming back to, like, having some kind of agency or some kind of impact on what voting with your dollar, right? I'm curious
Yeah.
if you noticed that, like I said, is that a generational thing, or is that just a we now have the information to know that, like, the way that we were doing things was, like, maybe not great?
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of both. I agree with like your perspective on the generational thing. I've actually had a lot of conversations about this with my grandparents because I think when they were my age or even younger and
Sure,
like their parents were
sure,
our age, it was like you couldn't, again, I'm from the Midwest. It's like back in their day in the Midwest, you really like you couldn't get avocados were kind of a novelty. Those were like, okay,
mhm,
these grow in a different region, these don't grow here. And so they're not like a regular thing. Like fruit baskets are seen as sort of like outdated now as gifts, but like I remember my great grandfather would like every Christmas buy like the big box of like oranges, and it was like was
nice.
so important to him. And I think it's because like he didn't have access to that for a lot of his life, and it felt very like novel that you could like
Mm,
have something
mhm,
that didn't grow to you locally. And so I think that it's like time is so weird, but we're really not that far off from that, and yet we've come so far. It's like we're so
yeah,
globalized now in like the food
yeah,
system. We're so like you can really buy anything you want at a grocery store almost anywhere now. Like certainly in the US. And so I think that it feels a little bit kind of like the pendulum is swinging back,
Sure.
and that, millennials kind of hit that timing, right? Where we were like, oh, this has gotten actually really out of hand. And like so much of what we're
Yeah.
consuming now is just like kind of garbage. And so, yeah, I think that push, like, from millennials kind of coming of age and, having more autonomy and being like, oh, like, what do we actually care about? It is, being like, well, where did this come from? Like, what happened to the people involved in producing this thing? Like, what's the supply chain? What are all these words that I
Yeah.
can't pronounce, and asking those questions. And I think it feels like we're still very much in flux. We talk a lot about, like as we sit here today, there's more and more Gen Z baristas behind coffee bars, and like it's the like what is important to them, and like the way that I'm seeing the changes, even in like millennials were so committed to like it's this coffee from this origin with this roast profile, this producer, and like
Mhm.
this pour over method. And like we were just talking the other day about something called the fluffy seagull, that's like marshmallow fluff smeared in a cup and like peanut butter and like espresso
Uh-huh.
and like there was a line out the door for that. And
Uh-huh.
I think that's like, to me, that really speaks to like where we're at as a society as well. It's like we need stuff to be fun. Like we need something to feel like fun
Yeah.
and engaging and light when so many other things don't. But I think it's like, with any generational trend, I feel like those swings happen just kind of organically. And that's part of the way that the universe like balances itself as we go, I
Right.
guess. But yeah, it's interesting.
What I also explained to my parents is like the concept of coffee shop is not a new idea. Like coffee shops have existed for forever, 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 forever. You go to Europe, you go to Vienna, it's like the capital of coffee shops in the world.
Yeah.
And it was this place where it's like, yes, they serve coffee, but it was a place to like be in communion with people that were studying and writing and creating and conversing and
Yeah.
hosting, and all of that stuff like is still very real. But then we also saw this like huge swing, at least I did as a consumer, towards like the coffee shop that's so bland it could be anywhere. That was like stripped of all of its culture and stripped of all of its comfy chairs and stripped of all of its nice like low lighting, and it just became kind of this like concrete hard seat no laptops place. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that we're going to pendulum swing back again from that? Because like the coffee shop experience of like the late 90s, early 2000s, even into the early 2010s was like comfy and cozy and neighborhood and familiar. And then those felt like they all kind of started to
Yeah.
go away. What do you think accounts for that?
Yeah. That part has always puzzled me a little bit, because I think, that sort of like minimalism rise happened
Yeah.
alongside this like very millennial driven, like origin focused, high quality, like, a lot of pretense, like a lot of
Yep.
like very,
Yep.
specific commitment to these little things. And in one way, I guess it makes sense, because I'm like, okay, well, like a minimalist aesthetic, then like really like there's nothing else to focus on.
Sure.
And so it's really
Sure.
about the pour over. It's really about the coffee bean. It's, it's about the food itself, whatever that might be. But I don't know. When that started happening, I personally never felt like it would last very long, because
Yeah.
it's not that inviting, I guess. And I think that like, it does why you maybe get like a little bit of an ego boost to be like, oh, I get my coffee at, such and such a place, and I feel very fancy, and and I pay like all this money for it. At the end of the day, like especially when times get tough, like we want the comfy chairs. We want like the place where we can go and be like, this is my community. I feel like home here. I feel, my barista knows me. My barista knows my dog's name. My barista knows what I'm going to order before I get there. And like, I can go there and kind of like take a deep breath and not, feel like I have to be like on my best behavior with all my tasting notes, tip of tongue. So I'm kind of glad to see the swing back. I also think like Couplet in LA is a great example. I think that like more like engaging, like fun, colorful branding that is like pulling people in is also so important to like what we're craving as connection right now, is where we like feel like there's more hope, frankly, I guess. And
Yes,
like,
and more diversity of options. Like, I think when you start to strip everything of
yeah,
its, like, cultural and ornamental and beautiful detailed, like, layering, then you're left with, like, kind of the big empty box, which is great. Again, if you're a coffee purist, like, I'm sure it's great, like, go in, like, no distractions, whatever, but for, like, the general coffee goer that wants more of, like, a vibe, I know that sounds like it's minimizing it, but we did this with Studio Tigre with the rebranding, and we absolutely leaned into Mo, her whole Filipino heritage, because she was K&M first, and then she started Studio Tigre coffee studio. But I'm a big, big fan of that. Like, big fan of like, why not have you like lean into the thing that makes you you, knowing that like from
yeah,
it's an abundance mindset thing, right? It's saying like there's enough to go around that it's okay if not everybody comes to mine because mine is me, and that's all right. And I think that
yeah.
that's refreshing. Hey KMA, as you're building your business, you're also building your community, but you might be feeling like all the tools that you need to do so are starting to weigh you down. You've got your website and socials, maybe also an app for video hosting, a calendar tool for events, a payment processor, a community hub, a chat app, and an email newsletter, and yet you still don't feel like you can talk to all of your people at once. Social media algorithms are hiding your carefully crafted post, and the rise of AI slop is turning people off of these online communities the very moment that we need them the most. It's getting harder and harder to know if you're connecting with a real human being, and none of these apps are really making your business run smoother and actually letting people talk to each other. Your community feels fragmented and you're losing your marbles constantly switching tabs. This is a death by 1,000 paper cuts. However, Heartbeat presents a solution. Heartbeat is an all-in-one community hosting platform that brings your chats, your courses, live events, and payments under one single roof, letting you own your data and your revenue without the technical headache so you can host the community that you've always dreamed of. Stop managing software and start leading people. Ready to build your own community hub? You can head over to heartbeat.chat/KMA to start your free trial. No credit card required. And when you're ready to level up like we did, you can use the code KMA30 for 30% off. Because you're a listener of the pod, I'd also like to personally invite you to join our community. Go ahead and head over to app.heartbeat.chat/KMA, or you can visit mkwcreative.co/KMA, which will take you on a redirect link to the group, which will be linked in today's show notes. Cheers, and we'll see you in there. But I want to go back to something that you talked about earlier, which was that coffee shops typically usually take the brunt of like economic downturn or like feel that because they are low margins businesses. Like, would you
Yeah.
say 10 to 15% profit margin? Like that's a pretty good,
Yeah.
that's a good running coffee shop.
That's if it's going really well.
If
Like
it's healthy,
that's a
right?
good exactly. Yeah.
Knowing that, how does that impact how you advise people on, when times are tough and when you do have to kind of circle back to your values, as many of us are doing right now? How does that either impact or inspire that action, knowing that there's not a lot of runway to play with?
No. Yeah, I mean, it's so tight. I think we've spent hundreds of hours talking about this over the past couple years because the pandemic hit this industry so hard, so hard. And, for a lot of folks, like, there really wasn't another option. Like, shops, had to close down. They were like, buy our merch so that we can hopefully survive this. And, like, a couple t shirts do not make up for
No.
the years that took from everybody. And so, I think it's what I saw happen first, like when that like really hit was that all of the community organizations that exist out of passion, out of love, like no one's getting compensated. People are like voluntarily putting together Thursday night throwdown, latte art rings. They're, voluntarily putting together these like coffee community organizations and doing like cuppings, like all these things. All of that just went away.
Yeah.
And it didn't come back until in a big way until like end of 2024. Like it took a long time. And I remember feeling so scared that it wouldn't. I was like, wow, this actually like it felt like it was so the industry before was like thriving and wonderful, but also like really
Sure.
no one's making a lot of money. And so it's like, oh, this is also kind of fragile in that way. And like, we're just talking about the coffee shops, like let alone the farmers that are growing the coffee. And I think that was also such a bummer that I think that wave of us getting like so detailed about the roast profiles and where the beans come from. It's like, we didn't actually really make that much progress on raising consumer awareness of like, why do you pay so much more for a glass of wine than you do for a cup of coffee? And like actually like passing that value down
Yeah.
the supply chain, which is really a bummer. But yeah, I think on the cafe side, like, seeing just the resilience of the industry, like it has come back. Like there's all these new organizations now. At World of Coffee coming up in April, and there's already like all these after parties in the works and all, just like there's all the energy is back. And I think it's like such a beautiful testament to the resilience of humans that we can like go through something like that and be like, you know what, we're going to get right back into it anyways, because this is important. Even if my margin at best is 10%, like this matters. And the industry is so full of people who believe that. And, that makes it easy to keep going when you can see folks around you that like believe in something bigger than themselves or believe in, even just the value of community and like are putting their own earnings, take home pay,
Yeah.
their own businesses, their own lines of credit, their own sort of like whatever it is that they are sacrificing or risking to be a part of this so that folks can have somewhere together and can have something like this. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room for improvement economically. And that's like that's another big reason we started the usual companies. I think like, baristas don't make enough money. And I think
Yeah.
that, part of that is the same thing with the farmers and like, being able to kind of look at that picture holistically and say like, okay, well, like, why is that? Why is
Yeah.
the expected coffee price so much less than a glass of wine when like producing a single cup of coffee has so many more steps, it's so much more complex, so many more hands touch it, and that's a really big problem to solve. But yeah, I think that's something that's always been really important to Brian and I as well. Or, trying to at least aim our efforts in a direction that kind of helps move the entire industry forward and like be a part of that rising tide so that
Yeah.
more of the folks that are working in it, all the, at all parts of the supply chain, all the way up to the cafe are, put in at least a little bit better of a position than where they sit today.
And I think consumers are hungry for it. I think consumers are hungry for information of, like, supporting the brands and the businesses that support their values. Like, I loved the convenience of Amazon. It doesn't align with my values anymore, so it's not for
Yeah.
me. But for my somebody else, my neighbor, my parents, whatever, the convenience outweighs for them the negative. And I'm not here to say, like, one's right and one's wrong, but, like, you have to do it in a way that's approachable for you. I also work from home, work from by myself. So, like, my outing where I get to go buy the thing that I need is like an interaction with a person. And I didn't realize how much I was stripping myself of that for what? Ease of convenience to just have it dropped off at my doorstep. And so I think there are a lot of people that are kind of like waking up sounds dramatic, but, like, more receptive to thinking about supply chain, thinking about how it impacts things, and even if money is tight, it's like, "Okay, the spending money that I do have, where am I gonna put it? What is to do the thing that makes me feel good about how I'm supporting my local economy, my community, the other business owners in my area?" But it's hard. I mean, it's hard to take in all that information and take in the world and still be a functioning human with a job.
Right. And know what to do about
I
it
know
on a
what to
day-to-day
do,
basis.
and know
Yeah.
that we can't fix these problems overnight, but this has to be, like, a continual, gradual process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think having like I don't know, that sort of like both the belief that things can be better and the tenacity to kind of like drive that forward, and also just from a consumer perspective, like, post pandemic to that point, it's sort of like, okay, like what has sort of occurred in the world that like we've been very busy focusing on these other, giant meta crises. And like the Amazon point is so true. And it's like at the end of the day, it's sort of like, well, this is, we're all making these little choices and some of these things are happening kind of like it feels like outside of us. But yeah, I think it's been nice to see, even folks within the hospitality industry, like taking that initiative and taking that responsibility and saying like, okay, well, like, here's what I'm going to do because like I have these few dollars and I'm going to put them somewhere that isn't, contributing to these, to these things. Yeah.
Well, and
It's a
it's
very,
important why we lead with our values as well, because I don't want anyone to come to my website and be confused about how I think people deserve basic human dignity and respect.
yeah,
Like, I don't want that to be confusing for anyone. Let me make that so clear about what
so
I think is
clear.
right and wrong. There should never be any mistake about where I stand, because if you're gonna give your dollars to me and my team, you have to know that, like, you're supporting the things that we support. So, all of that is cyclical, and so I really have been, like, honored. We work with a few retainer clients, and I've really been on their butts of, like, "Guys, now is a really good time to remind your people of where you're at. Like, let your people know that you know right from
Yeah.
wrong, that you believe in the things that you believe in, that you're there to support them." Because it's a bit like, and I had this hard conversation with a client. I was like, it feels a bit crass to say, like, here, buy our sweatshirt, knowing that your consumer, the next video that they scroll, who knows what they're going to see?
Yeah.
Who knows? And if
Yes.
you have customers that live in Minneapolis, say something to them. Do you know what I mean? Say
Yeah.
something to, like,
Yeah.
and it's hard because I think a lot of people are kind of stuck in a place of fear and, like, paralysis of, like, "Oh, if I say that, then I don't wanna do politics with business." And I said, "Girl, business has always been political. Always.
Always and always will be.
And always will be."
And it is like, to your point, like so easy to feel like it's disconnected and be like, oh, we're
Yeah.
doing like peppy marketing copy for a sweatshirt sale. And like, yes, like the next thing you scroll to is just like abject horror of like,
Yep.
name the focus. But yeah, I think it is in times like these, like I feel like it's really easy to feel disempowered because it is, these are giant problems. It's sort of like, oh, what can I do with my, small business, or what can I do with my little 8 hours in a day that I have? And I think something that has always been inspiring to me about the hospitality industry is how consistently it
Yeah.
is able to show up. Like to the point about Minneapolis, there are so many cafes there that we've been following that are, they've turned into sort of like free fridge or like free
Yeah.
food
Food centers.
locations that, yeah, just like to service the community. And it's like they're always on the front lines. The hospitality industry, I feel like, has always been like ready to show up with like a cup of coffee and a sandwich or like, like elbow grease, whatever it is
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
like the community needs. And I think that's really powerful because like that is the mechanism that we have for changing things that are wrong. And, if we just like sit in the fear and the overwhelm and, keep the sweatshirt sale and, whatever's coming next separate, then like we're not probably going to make that much progress on it. And so I don't
Exactly.
know. I try
And
to,
to the, like, point from earlier, like, being clear about your values may bring you, not to say that you should do it in a manipulative way, but does bring you more business with the people that are actually aligned with you. Like, I'm a
yeah, like
believer
aligned
in that.
collaborators. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just like I am more inspired to go support a business that I know I'm aligned with than one that I'm lukewarm about. Like, that I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I don't know."
Yeah. And
It's tricky.
it is. And I think like what we were talking about earlier with the, is this like, are these eating habits and like,
Sure.
are they, how generational are they? Like, I do think there is this sort of like overlap of that too, where it's like, if we are actually asking real questions and we're tracking down details of how things came to be and we're actually like putting collective community energy towards shifting things in a direction that's like better for the world or like more towards the world we want to live in, then like a lot of those gaps in the food system or in any system kind of like fix themselves. And I think that like that is something that we've been talking about that a lot with my team recently, that it's just like you actually do have more power than you think. And like your day to day and how you're spending those hours and where you're aiming that energy is actually really powerful. And that like sometimes those things can shift a lot faster than we feel like when it is a dark, heavy moment like this. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's been something that has kept me going consistently. And like I always feel like it's so well demonstrated in the hospitality industry, regardless of what, is happening in the world at the time.
And the reminder that, like, social media is not the end all be all of your marketing. Like, it's a part of it, it's a gear in the machine, but if it were to go away because the whole thing is filled with AI slop and billionaire surveillance and all this stuff, tin hat, hello. Um,
Truly.
if that's the case and everyone gets off the platform, like, Facebook engagement is down 46% year over year, I would need to go where the eyeballs are. And it's like, okay, so I can't reach
Yeah.
40,000 people. I don't need 40,000 clients. I need 40. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
You know what
Yep.
I mean? So it's like, would
Yeah.
I rather than put that energy into people on a one-to-one connection basis in person, talking to them, solving their problems in a way that impacts not only me, but my whole community? Like, kinda, yeah. So it's also that, like, remembering and realizing that I think we've gotten really lost in the sauce with, like, the online and the e-com and the again, like, the metrics, the followers,
Yeah.
things that we lost the actual core of it. Like, even some of my friends that work in social media marketing as of this week were making videos like, "I'm tired of playing this fucking game. I'm tired of playing
Yeah.
this game." Like, it's not and there's podcasts about it, like, John Favreau from Pod Save America on his show Offline had and I'm just gonna flub the guy's name, but I'll link it in the show notes. He had an expert on talking about the enshittification of the internet. And I just, like, love that as a terminology of, like, nothing will be as ever good as it once was. We're like a junkie chasing a high that's never like, that's not gonna exist again because the model itself is meant to run itself into the ground. It's like, you need the users, and then you sell the eyeballs to the brands, and then the brands try to get to the people, but then the people are like, "Ugh, all I see is ads," and then they leave, and you're just, like,
Yeah.
constantly chasing this downward spiral, and I'm just like, "Oh, what is the point of anything?"
Yeah.
So it's hard to be a marketer right now, I think.
It is. It's really difficult. The other thing that I was thinking of when you were talking earlier is about like how much of a like craving there is for experience versus just like, digital whatever, and that like brands are picking up on that and
Yeah,
not really fast enough from my perspective. Like I think
agree.
it's like because yeah, it's sort of like, okay, well, at this point, your Instagram feed is just sort of like a mess no matter who you are. And it's like a conglomeration of ads and, all the
Sure.
horrors and all the things. And like I think in these moments we're really like, oh, we need to remember that we're human. We need to like connect
Yeah.
with other humans and feel something that isn't this emotion. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, I don't know. I think it's like it's hard to make that transition though, because like
yeah,
to your point, it's like everybody. That's what you do. You have to be active on all the social channels. You have to like check all these boxes and make sure that it all looks a certain way. And it's yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see how far we can like pull back from that,
Yeah.
I guess, like while still
Yeah.
utilizing it where it makes sense. Yeah, it's wild.
Well, let's sign off with this. What's something that you're looking forward to about the coffee industry? Something that's caught your eye, something that you're like, "Ooh, actually this part is really interesting," or I know we've got World of Coffee coming up. What are things that have you like
Yeah.
optimistically excited about where things are heading? I know that's a lofty question.
Oh, I love it. Well, one thing that has given me a lot of hope is how many independent like coffee collectives or coffee organizations have sort of like resurfaced or like formed new after the pandemic. There's so many. We're sponsoring something next month with Florida Coffee Collective, and they have a really cool blend of like consumer interests or just like folks in the Florida market that go to all these shops and the actual like cafe community themselves. And actually, that is part of the inspiration for a new program we're launching at the usual next month as well, called Back Bar Club. And the goal is to provide a space for baristas to basically have access to kind of a whole suite of things that will help with career development. I think in line with kind of like the usual economic goals and the usual like goals for kind of driving the industry forward. Like that's such a big part of it. So many talented folks that like start as baristas, basically are like, oh, like I can open a shop and make 10% margin, or I can like be a barista forever. And like, where else can I go from here?
Right.
And we're really trying to help collect and create resources for there to be easier paths for folks to be like, oh, I could work for a company that like, kind of sells into the channel. I'd be like an account manager. I could like, there's all these different like ways that you can build a career in and adjacent to the coffee industry. And so, yeah, we have a lot of really exciting things planned for that. But I think just like seeing folks, bring that energy back, even when we're in such an energy, like competitive moment. And like, there's so
Uh-huh.
many things fighting for our attention that I'm seeing folks like all across the country, folks kind of like collecting together and like organizing. And, even if it's just for like a coffee cupping, that is like, I think so foundational to having that community and being able
Yeah.
to, put that collective power towards a better future. It just gives me a lot of hope on the day to day for sure.
Oh, we love that. Okay. Well, where can everyone follow you, maybe work with you at the usual? See your stuff on social. I know we talked about in-person stuff, so if you're going to be at World of Coffee, come find us.
Yes,
Um, but
absolutely.
where can everyone find you?
We will be at World of Coffee with one of our new brands that we're launching, Pixel Dust. You can find us on our website is www.itstheusual.com. We're on Instagram and most other social channels as theusual.company and would love to chat with anybody through those channels.
Yay! Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sadie. Guys, if you like today's episode, don't forget to send it to a friend, save it, share it, leave a comment anywhere that you're watching this or listening to it. There's comments on Spotify now. Did you know this? So leave us a comment on
Yeah.
Spotify. Maybe drop a little coffee emoji if you made it all the way to the end. We'd love to see that. And we will catch you next time. Sadie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. This was so lovely.
See ya. Bye.